The city of Vera glowed like a jewel under the twin suns. Its towers of crystal reached high into the sky, and the wide streets below were filled with traders, guards, and scholars. For Princess Liora, this city had always been home, a place of safety and beauty. But on this day, she felt a heavy weight pressing on her heart. She stood at the balcony of her chamber, looking out across the kingdom. Her father, King Aranel, had summoned her to the grand hall that morning. The words he spoke still echoed in her mind. "You will marry the human warrior," he had said with pride in his deep voice. "This union will bind our people and theirs. It is the path to peace." Liora had felt her chest tighten at those words. Marriage? To a human? She had heard too many stories of them during her childhood. Humans were said to be hard, unbending, and ruthless in battle. They fought with cold eyes and steel hearts, never showing mercy. How could she, a princess of Vera, tie her life to such a being? She paced the chamber, her long gown sweeping the polished floor. The servants lowered their heads and said nothing, though she could see the worry in their eyes. The news had already spread through the palace. Some of the nobles celebrated, calling it a wise move that would end centuries of distrust. Others whispered their doubts. Her closest friend, a handmaiden named Arya, dared to speak. "Princess, maybe the king only wishes to keep the kingdom safe. The humans are strong, and their fleets guard the stars." Liora turned sharply. "Safe? Or bound in chains? What safety is there in giving my life away? Do they not already look at us as weaker? This marriage will not be for me, Arya. It will be for power." Her voice broke with frustration. She had always obeyed her father, always trusted his wisdom. But now, she felt like a pawn in a game too large for her heart to bear. Later that evening, the grand hall of the palace filled with nobles, guards, and ambassadors. Banners of gold and silver hung from the high ceiling. The king rose from his throne, his tall frame commanding respect from all present. His crown gleamed as he raised his hand for silence. "My people," he said, his voice carrying through the chamber, "today we take the first step into a new age. The bloodshed between us and the humans has ended, but peace must be strengthened with bonds that cannot be broken. Therefore, my daughter, Princess Liora, shall be joined in union with Commander Rian of the human fleets. This is not only a marriage but a bridge between two worlds." A wave of voices spread across the hall. Some cheered, some gasped, and some muttered their doubts. Liora felt all eyes turn to her. Her heart raced, but she stood tall, her silver hair shining under the light. Inside, however, her spirit burned with fear and anger. "No," she whispered to herself, though the word was swallowed by the noise of the hall. The announcement continued. A human delegation had already arrived on Vera, waiting in the outer chambers. The warrior himself would be presented in 3 days' time. Until then, the court would celebrate the coming bond. Liora could hardly breathe. She felt as though walls were closing around her. The thought of standing beside this Commander Rian made her chest tighten. She imagined him as a towering soldier with eyes like stone, a man who knew only war. Was this to be her life? To stand at the side of someone she did not know, someone she feared? That night, she slipped into the palace gardens, seeking comfort in the quiet. The air smelled of sweet blossoms, and the fountains whispered in the dark. But even here, peace did not come. She thought of her people, of the responsibility she carried as their princess. She thought of her father, who believed so firmly in this alliance. And she thought of the human warrior, whose face she had not yet seen, but whose shadow already loomed over her heart. Arya found her there, sitting by the fountain with her head bowed. "You are troubled, my princess," she said softly. Liora looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I am more than troubled, Arya. I am afraid. Afraid of what I must give up. Afraid of what I must face. Afraid of him? Arya knelt beside her. Perhaps he is not as you fear. Stories often grow darker when told from afar. Maybe, when you meet him, you will see something different. Liora shook her head. No. Humans are ruthless. That is what I was told since I was a child. And if that is true, then I cannot belong to one. Her words hung in the night air. The stars above shimmered, silent witnesses to her struggle. Somewhere beyond those stars, Commander Rian prepared to step into the world of Vera, unaware that the princess who was to be his bride whispered a vow to the night sky. No way, father, Liora said firmly. Not that human. Not him. The day of the human arrival came sooner than Liora wished. The palace buzzed with excitement and unease. Servants rushed across the marble halls, preparing for the grand reception. Banners of both kingdoms, the silver crest of Vera and the blue emblem of Earth's fleet, hung side by side, a symbol of the new alliance. Princess Liora stood in her chamber, staring into the tall mirror. The gown chosen for her was made of pale silk, embroidered with shining threads. Her hair had been woven with silver bands, as tradition demanded. Yet she did not feel like a princess. She felt like a prisoner being dressed for display. Arya, her loyal handmaiden, tried to smile as she adjusted the gown. You look beautiful, my princess. No one will doubt your grace today. Liora shook her head. Grace will not change my fate, Arya. They will bring him before me, and the hall will cheer, but my heart will not. Arya lowered her eyes, unable to argue. When the horn sounded through the palace, Liora knew it was time. She followed the guards through long corridors toward the grand hall. Her steps felt heavy, though her face remained calm. She had trained all her life to hide fear behind a mask of dignity. The grand hall was filled with nobles, scholars, and warriors of Vera. On the other side stood the human delegation, tall in their dark uniforms. Their presence drew whispers. Many in Vera had never seen a human up close before. Some stared with open curiosity, others with silent mistrust. At the center of the hall, King Aranel rose from his throne. His voice echoed with authority. Welcome, honored guests. Today, the bond between our worlds begins. The human ambassador stepped forward first. He spoke politely, praising the king's wisdom and the strength of the alliance. But Liora barely heard his words. Her eyes searched the group until they found him. Commander Rian. He stood tall among his people, clad in a simple but sharp uniform. His hair was dark, his face stern, his eyes steady. He did not bow in fear, nor did he smirk in pride. He simply stood as if carved from stone, his presence filling the hall without a single word. Liora's chest tightened. This was the man she was to marry? He was every part the warrior she had imagined, strong, unyielding, and unreadable. She wanted to turn away, but she could not. His gaze met hers across the hall, and for a brief moment, she forgot to breathe. The king gestured. Commander Rian, step forward. Rian obeyed, walking with measured steps. His boots struck the polished floor with a steady rhythm. When he reached the dais, he bowed his head slightly, not low as a subject, but in respect. Your Majesty, he said in a calm voice, I come in honor of the bond between our peoples. I stand ready to fulfill my duty. His words were simple, but they carried a weight that silenced the hall. King Aranel nodded with approval. You honor us, Commander. Soon, your lives will be joined, and our worlds will walk as one. The audience erupted in cheers, but Liora felt her throat tighten. Joined. The word struck her like a chain. She forced herself to keep her posture, though her mind screamed in protest. When the cheers quieted, the king spoke again. My daughter, Princess Liora, will now greet her future husband. Every eye turned to her. Liora felt the weight of 1,000 gazes pressing down, but she stepped forward with calm grace. Her gown shimmered under the lights as she moved to the front of the dais. Rian's eyes followed her, steady and unreadable. When she stood before him, silence filled the hall. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Finally, Rian said, "Princess." He gave a small bow. Liora lifted her chin, her voice firm. "Commander." It was the briefest of exchanges, yet it stirred whispers across the hall. To many, it seemed polite. But to Liora, it felt like a battle of wills. After the ceremony ended, the guests moved to the banquet. Music filled the air, and golden dishes were carried across long tables. Liora sat beside her father, with Rian placed near her. Though they were close, a wall of silence stood between them. At last, Rian spoke. His voice was quiet, meant only for her. "I know this is not your choice. I will not pretend otherwise." Liora stiffened, surprised. She turned her eyes to him. "Then why do you agree to it? Is duty so heavy that you would bind yourself to a stranger?" His gaze did not waver. "I fight for peace. If my union can prevent war, then it is a burden I will carry." His words unsettled her. He did not sound ruthless or cruel. He sounded calm, steady, even noble in a way she had not expected. But she would not allow herself to soften. "You speak of duty, Commander. But I will not be duty's prisoner." He did not argue. He simply nodded once, as if he respected her defiance. Then he returned to silence, leaving her more confused than before. That night, as the guests celebrated, Liora slipped away once more to the gardens. The sound of music drifted from the palace, but she could not bear it. She sat by the fountain, staring at the stars. She had expected to meet a ruthless human warrior, a man who would command her with cold eyes. Instead, she had met someone who spoke of peace, who did not demand her obedience. And that, somehow, frightened her even more. The palace of Vera shone brighter than ever in the days after the human arrival. Feasts and councils filled the halls, and everywhere people whispered about the alliance. Some said it was a wise decision, a step toward peace that would end generations of mistrust. Others whispered doubts, claiming that humans and Varans could never truly live as one. Princess Liora felt caught in the middle of all these voices. No matter where she went, people bowed and smiled, but their eyes always carried questions. She could almost hear their thoughts. Will the princess accept this bond? Will she bend to the will of the king? Her father, King Aranel, called her to the council chamber one morning. The long room glowed with sunlight that filtered through tall crystal windows. At the round table sat members of the royal court, Varan nobles, and the human delegation. Rian sat among them, calm and silent, his dark uniform neat and his posture straight. "Daughter," the king said, his voice carrying authority. "You and Commander Rian must begin learning each other's ways. Peace cannot grow from distance. It must be built step by step, word by word." Liora kept her face still, though her heart tightened. She bowed her head slightly. "Yes, father." The council continued with discussions of trade routes and defense pacts. Liora listened, but her thoughts kept drifting to the man across the table. Rian's expression never changed. He listened closely to every speaker, his eyes sharp but calm. He never interrupted, never raised his voice. He was like a blade sheathed, always ready but never careless. When the meeting ended, the king asked Liora and Rian to remain. The others bowed and left. Aranel leaned forward on his throne-like chair. "You will walk the gardens together," he said firmly. "You will speak, you will listen, and you will try to understand each other. That is my command." Liora's lips tightened. She wanted to protest, but she saw the unshakable look in her father's eyes. To disobey him in front of Rian would shame them both. So, with reluctant grace, she turned to the warrior and said, "Shall we?" Rian bowed his head slightly. As you wish. They walked through the palace gardens in silence. The air smelled of blossoms, and fountains sang softly in the distance. But between them, the silence felt heavy, like a wall that could not be broken. Finally, Liora spoke. Do you always obey orders so easily, Commander? Even when they go against your heart? Rian glanced at her, his face unreadable. A soldier learns to balance heart and duty. If I always followed only my heart, many lives would have been lost in battle. If I followed only duty, I would be little more than a machine. Balance is the way. His calm words irritated her more than anger would have. So you balance, she said coldly. But where am I in this balance? Am I simply another duty to you? Rian stopped walking. He turned to face her, his eyes steady. You are not a duty, princess. But this marriage is. I will not lie about that. Yet I do not want a wife who lives as a prisoner. If you refuse me, I will not force you. Liora blinked, stunned. She had expected him to demand obedience, to speak of loyalty and vows. Instead, he offered her freedom. You would defy both our rulers, she asked quietly. Rian's jaw tightened. If it meant binding someone in chains, yes. For a long moment, neither spoke. The sound of the fountains filled the silence between them. Liora's heart beat faster. She had feared ruthlessness, but what she found unsettled her even more. He was not cruel. He was controlled. And perhaps, under that control, there was something deeper. Later that day, during the evening feast, Liora sat beside her father again. The hall was filled with music, laughter, and the clinking of cups. Yet her mind kept returning to Rian's words. I will not force you. When the king rose to speak, his words struck her like fire. My daughter has walked beside the commander today. Soon, their vows will be spoken before the stars. Their bond will be the foundation of peace. The nobles cheered. The humans raised their cups. But Liora felt a spark of rebellion ignite within her. She could not hold her tongue any longer. She rose to her feet, her voice clear and strong. Father, I cannot accept this so easily. I will not vow myself to a man I barely know. I will not marry for duty alone. The hall fell silent. All eyes turned to her. The king's expression hardened, but she continued, her heart racing. Peace cannot be built on chains, father. It must be built on trust. And I do not yet trust this man. Gasps filled the room. Some nobles lowered their eyes. Others whispered in shock. The humans exchanged glances, uncertain how to respond. Rian, however, did not flinch. He stood, his voice calm. The princess speaks truth. Trust cannot be forced. If peace is to last, it must be chosen. I will not demand her vow until she gives it freely. The hall erupted again, half in support, half in outrage. The king raised his hand for silence, his eyes flashing. Enough, he said, his voice sharp as steel. This matter will be discussed in private. For now, the feast continues. But the damage had been done. The nobles had seen the princess defy her father, and they had seen the human commander stand with her. That night, Liora returned to her chamber, her heart pounding. She had spoken against her father, against tradition, against the will of two kingdoms. And yet, deep inside, she felt a spark of pride. For the first time, she had stood not as a pawn, but as herself. And for the first time, she wondered if the ruthless human warrior was not her enemy, but something far more complicated. The days passed quietly at the palace, but a tension lingered that few could see. Princess Liora spent her time walking the gardens, studying the stars, and speaking quietly with Arya. Yet she could not shake the feeling that unseen eyes watched the palace walls. One evening, as the twin suns began to set, Liora's father called her to the council chamber. The room was darker than usual, lit by soft glowing crystals that cast long shadows across the marble floor. Liora's stomach tightened with unease. "Princess," King Aranel began, his tone serious, "I must tell you of danger. There are those among our people who do not wish this alliance. They see humans as enemies, and they will try to break our bond." Liora's eyes widened. "Break it? How? Who would do such a thing?" The king shook his head. "Some nobles and warriors have whispered of rebellion. They believe that humans are too different, too harsh, too dangerous. If they act, they may bring war to our doorstep." Her heart raced. "And I am supposed to marry a human, while they plot against us? How can peace survive with such hatred in our own kingdom?" "You are correct to worry," her father said gravely. "You must be cautious, princess. Trust is fragile, and enemies can hide in plain sight." Liora left the council chamber feeling a chill run down her spine. She returned to her chambers and found Arya waiting. "They are everywhere, aren't they?" Liora whispered. "They may be," Arya replied softly. "But not everyone wishes you harm. You have allies, too." The next day, Liora walked through the palace halls with careful steps. Whispers brushed past her ears, some curious, some cold. She could sense the growing tension. Even servants seemed more cautious, as if afraid to speak freely. Rian had requested a private audience with her that evening. When she arrived in the training yard, he was already there, standing by the fountain where the water reflected the last light of the suns. "Princess," he said quietly, "you look troubled." Liora shook her head. "I do not know who to trust. Some of our people do not want this marriage, and they may act against us. I fear what may come." Rian nodded. "I understand. Humans have enemies, and I am no stranger to betrayal. But if we act carefully, we can protect what matters." "How?" Liora asked, frustration in her voice. "I am only a princess. I do not command armies. I cannot fight like you." "You can do more than you know," Rian said. "Wisdom and courage can be stronger than steel. Even words can stop a battle before it begins." Liora studied him closely. His words were not boastful, not commanding. They were calm, steady, and sincere. He did not see her as a weak child or a prize. He saw her as a person. That night, as the palace slept, Liora could not. She wandered the quiet halls, thinking of Rian's words. She thought of the whispers of rebellion, of the nobles plotting against the alliance, and of the humans who had traveled across the stars to join her people. Her fear was still strong, but so was a growing determination. She realized that running from the future would not save her. She would have to face the rebels, face the humans, and face her own heart. The following morning, news came that confirmed her fears. A group of masked intruders had been spotted near the outer gates, moving under cover of the early light. They had been stopped by palace guards before they could enter, but their message was clear: not everyone welcomed peace. King Aranel convened an emergency council. "These rebels seek to destroy the alliance," he said. "We must act quickly to protect the palace, the princess, and the humans." Liora listened silently, her mind racing. She could feel the tension pressing on her chest. Yet she also felt a strange sense of clarity. The rebellion was not just about politics. It was about fear, about hate, about refusing to understand what humans could offer. Rian approached her quietly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We will face them together," he said simply. "We are stronger together than apart." For the first time, Liora felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this warrior, who had seemed so ruthless at first, was not the enemy. Perhaps he could be a partner, not only in duty but in courage and trust. That night, she stood by the balcony, looking at the stars above. The rebellion was a shadow over her world, but she could feel a light growing inside herself. She would not be afraid forever. She would learn, she would prepare, and she would face the challenges ahead. The kingdom of Vero was fragile, the humans were strangers, and the rebels were near. But Princess Liora was beginning to understand one truth: courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. And for the first time, she wondered if the human warrior she feared might be the one to help her face it. The night was quiet, but a sense of danger hung over the palace like a shadow. Princess Liora could not sleep. The rebellion that had been whispered about now felt real, close to the gates, and even closer to her heart. She walked silently through the halls, her steps light on the polished floors. A sudden shout broke the silence. Alarm bells rang, echoing through the palace walls. Guards rushed past, their weapons ready. Liora's heart raced. Something was happening, and it was near. Rian appeared beside her, moving with swift precision. "Stay close to me," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes scanned every corner. Liora's fear spiked. She had imagined danger many times, but seeing it now, so close and real, made her stomach twist. "What is happening?" she asked. "Rebels," Rian said. "They have found a way past the outer guards. We must move quickly." They ran through the corridors together, slipping through hidden doors and quiet hallways. Liora's gown brushed the floors, but she hardly noticed. Her mind was focused on survival, on the strange calm of the human beside her, and on the thought that she might not be able to survive without him. They reached the palace courtyard, where the fountains glimmered under the soft light of the twin moons. Shadows moved quickly among the columns. The rebels were close. Rian drew his blade, a sleek weapon that gleamed with a blue edge. Liora froze for a moment, but he reached for her hand. "Come," he urged. "We must escape." Together, they slipped through a secret passage known only to the royal family. The passage led beyond the palace walls into the forest that bordered the city. Liora's heart pounded with fear and awe. She had never seen Rian fight, and yet she trusted him entirely in that moment. Ahead, the forest was dark and thick. Rian moved with confidence, leading her through winding paths and over small streams. The rebels' voices echoed behind them, but the warriors were skilled and well-trained, and they slowed the intruders' pursuit. At one point, a group of rebels appeared on a hill above them. They raised weapons, ready to strike. Rian quickly pulled Liora behind a large tree. "Stay low," he whispered. She nodded, her hands trembling. She had never held a weapon in her life, yet now she felt a strange bond with this human warrior. He was calm, precise, and determined. And for some reason, she felt that if she did not trust him, they would not survive. Rian attacked the rebels with skillful movements, not wasting a single motion. His sword moved like water, precise and strong. The rebels were skilled, but his experience was greater. Liora watched in amazement, her fear mingling with admiration. When the last of the rebels had fallen back, Rian turned to her. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Yes," Liora said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thanks to you." "You did well too," he replied. "You stayed calm. That is important in danger." They continued through the forest until they reached a hidden cave, a place Rian had chosen for safety. The entrance was small and easy to defend. Inside, the cool air smelled of earth and stone. Liora sank to the ground, exhausted, but alive. Rian sat beside her, his sword resting against the wall. "You see now," he said softly, "humans are not only warriors. We can protect, we can defend, and we can trust. But trust must be earned by both sides." Liora looked at him, her eyes wide. I never thought I would say this, but I trust you." Rian smiled faintly, a small crack in his usually stern expression. Then we can survive this together. For hours, they rested in the cave, listening to the distant sounds of the city and the retreating rebels. Liora thought about the palace, about her people, and about the life she had once imagined. She realized that the world had changed in a single night, and that she could not return to her old life. When the first light of dawn touched the forest, Liora and Rian emerged from the cave. The city lay quiet in the distance, still unaware of how close danger had come. Liora felt a mixture of relief and fear. The rebellion was not over, but she had learned something important: she could face danger, and she could face it with someone she could trust. She turned to Rian. "I never imagined a human could be more than I feared." He met her gaze steadily. "Fear is natural. Courage is choosing to act even when you are afraid." Liora nodded. She felt a new strength growing inside her, a quiet determination that would not fade. The palace, the rebellion, and the humans were all part of her life now, and she was ready to face them. Together, they began their journey back to the city, prepared to meet the challenges that awaited them. Liora no longer felt like a frightened princess. She felt like a partner, standing beside someone who would fight for her, and with her, for the peace of their worlds. The forest outside the palace still carried a quiet tension, even after the night of the rebel attack. Princess Liora and Commander Rian had returned to the city, but the memory of danger lingered in Liora's mind. She could not stop thinking about how close they had come to disaster, and yet how Rian had protected her without hesitation. That evening, the two of them walked in the palace gardens, seeking calm among the flowering trees. Liora's steps were slow, and her mind was heavy with questions. She had always thought humans were ruthless, unfeeling, and driven only by strength. But Rian's actions had shown her something different: a discipline born of experience, yes, but also a sense of care, a respect for life. "Commander," she began cautiously, "I need to understand you, to understand humans." Rian stopped and looked at her. The soft glow of the lamps reflected in his dark eyes. "What do you wish to know, Princess?" "Everything," Liora admitted. "Why are humans so strong, so disciplined? Why do you seem so controlled? And yet, last night, you showed care. How can you be both?" Rian took a deep breath. "Humans are shaped by many things. We fight, we struggle, we lose. War teaches us discipline, and life teaches us care. I have seen my people suffer, I have seen families lost, and I have learned that strength without heart is meaningless. That is why I fight, not only with skill, but with purpose. Not to conquer, but to protect." Liora listened, her fear slowly giving way to understanding. The human before her was not a machine of war, as she had believed. He was a person, a man shaped by his experiences, strong but not unkind, disciplined but capable of compassion. "Do you regret any battles you have fought?" she asked. Rian's gaze turned distant for a moment. "Many," he admitted. "Every choice comes with a cost. I have lost friends, and I have seen lives taken that I could not save. That is why I carry the weight of my duty carefully. I do not wish to cause unnecessary pain. I only wish to protect what is dear." Liora felt a lump in her throat. She had never considered that humans could carry such burdens. In her kingdom, power was often displayed through status and command. Here was a human whose strength came from responsibility, from understanding the consequences of every action. They walked in silence for a time, the night air filled with the scent of flowers and the soft rustle of leaves. Liora's mind turned to the coming days. The rebellion had not ended. There were still those in her kingdom who opposed the human alliance, who would stop at nothing to prevent peace. And yet, beside her, she saw someone she could trust, someone who would not only defend her but also show her the strength of humanity. "Princess," Rian said quietly, breaking the silence, "I do not wish to rush our bond. You have every right to be cautious. But I hope, in time, you will see that humans are capable of more than what you fear. Liora looked at him, her heart softening. I am beginning to see, she admitted. I am beginning to understand. But how can I be sure that I can trust fully? That I will not lose control of my own life? Rian smiled faintly, a small warmth that softened his usually stern expression. Trust is built, not given. It is earned step by step. I will not force you, and I will not command your heart. But if you allow it, I will walk beside you, and together we can face what comes. For the first time, Liora felt a sense of relief she had not known before. The human she had feared, the warrior who had seemed so ruthless, was not an enemy. He was a partner, someone who could teach her courage and wisdom. Their quiet conversation was interrupted by a distant alarm. Guards rushed past, shouting warnings. A smaller group of rebels had returned, hoping to test the city's defenses after the previous night. Rian immediately drew his blade, moving with calm precision. Liora watched him, her fear mingling with admiration. This time, she did not hide behind walls of worry. She stood ready, understanding that courage sometimes meant facing danger with someone you trusted. The rebels approached the palace outskirts, but Rian and the city guards were prepared. With coordinated effort, the attackers were stopped before they could reach the inner walls. Rian fought with skill, but he also protected the civilians nearby, ensuring no one was harmed unnecessarily. After the skirmish ended, Liora approached him. You fight not only with strength, but with care, she said softly. Rian sheathed his sword and nodded. That is the way. Strength without heart is nothing. And now, Princess, you understand that humans are not only warriors. We can be guardians, allies, and friends. It is a choice we make every day. Liora smiled faintly, feeling a new confidence growing within her. She realized that her fear of the human warrior was beginning to fade, replaced by understanding, respect, and a hint of trust. The rebellion had tested them, but it had also taught Liora a valuable lesson: appearances could be deceiving, and courage came in many forms. She had seen the truth beneath the armor, and it had changed her view of the human before her. For the first time, she felt that the future was not something to fear, but something she could face step by step, alongside the warrior she had once dreaded, but now began to respect. The city of Vera awoke to a tense morning. Word had spread quickly, the rebels were preparing a final attack on the palace. Citizens hurried to secure their homes, while the palace guards readied themselves for the challenge. Princess Liora stood on her balcony, looking at the rising suns. Her heart was steady, but her mind raced. Today would decide the future of her kingdom and the alliance with the humans. Rian approached her silently, his armor gleaming in the morning light. Are you ready? He asked, his voice calm. Liora turned to him, her gaze firm. I am. We cannot let fear control us. Today, we act for the people, for peace, and for truth. Together, they moved to the training yard, where guards and soldiers were forming ranks. Humans and Varans stood side by side, a united front that had once seemed impossible. Liora felt a surge of pride. This was her world, her people, and the human warrior beside her. They would face the threat together. The rebels arrived with a roar, their numbers greater than expected. But they had underestimated the unity of the palace and its allies. Rian led the defense, not with anger, but with clear strategy. Every move he made protected the civilians, minimized harm, and showed discipline. Liora watched closely, learning that courage could be calm, not just loud and bold. When the rebels breached the outer gates, Liora took her place beside Rian. She had been given a small blade for protection, not for fighting, but as a symbol of her choice. She stood tall, refusing to hide. She had once feared the human warrior, but now she stood beside him as an equal, sharing the weight of responsibility. Rian nodded to her, understanding in his eyes. Stay close. Watch, learn, and trust. The battle was fierce but controlled. Rian and the Veyron guards worked in harmony, cutting off the rebels' advance and protecting the innocent. Liora saw how his strength was balanced with care, how he fought for more than victory, he fought to defend life. In the midst of the chaos, Liora realized something profound. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. Trust was not given blindly, but earned through experience and loyalty. And now, she could see that the human warrior beside her embodied both. After hours of struggle, the rebels were finally pushed back. The palace and city were safe, the people unharmed. The alliance had survived the test of fire, and the unity between humans and Veyrons had proven stronger than hatred. Liora turned to Rian, her face glowing with relief and determination. "You have shown me something I did not expect," she said softly. "Strength can be gentle. Fear can be faced. And humans can be more than I imagined." Rian smiled faintly. "And you have shown me that courage is not just strength or skill. It is heart, wisdom, and the choice to act for what is right." Later that evening, the palace held a special ceremony. The council chamber was filled with nobles, soldiers, and representatives from both worlds. The banners of Veyra and Earth were displayed together, a symbol of unity and hope. King Aranel rose, his expression proud. "The rebellion has been defeated, not by might alone, but by courage, trust, and partnership. Today, we witness the beginning of a bond chosen by both heart and duty." He turned to his daughter. "Princess Liora, will you accept Commander Rian as your partner, not only in duty but in life?" Liora stepped forward, her head held high. She looked at Rian, seeing not only the warrior she had feared but the man she had come to trust. She had faced her doubts, her fear, and her heart. Now, she could make a choice of her own. "I accept," she said clearly, her voice steady. "Not for duty alone, but because I trust him, and because I choose him." Rian stepped forward, bowing respectfully before speaking. "I accept, Princess Liora. Not for duty alone, but because I wish to walk beside you, as a partner, as an ally, and as a friend." The chamber erupted in applause. Nobles, guards, and citizens cheered. The alliance between humans and Veyrons was no longer just a policy, it was a union of choice, courage, and trust. That night, Liora stood on her balcony once more, looking at the stars above. She thought of the journey she had traveled from fear to understanding, from doubt to trust. She knew the future would not always be easy, but now she faced it with confidence. Rian joined her quietly, his hand brushing hers. "Together," he said simply. Liora smiled, squeezing his hand. "Together." And under the twin suns and sparkling stars of Veyra, two worlds found hope, and a princess discovered that courage, trust, and understanding could change the course of everything. Peace had been earned, and a new journey had begun, one chosen by heart, not by fear.